Okay. In this video, we're going to talk about apexes and how apexes relate to cornering. We're also going to go through a couple of situations where apexes are important to consider when you are setting up corners. First thing to consider, however, is what exactly is an apex? Well, an apex is nothing more than a point. So if I actually draw like a mountaintop here, maybe add a little bit of snow right there. Very pretty snow-capped mountain. An apex, being a point, would just be this area right here. Okay, now it's interesting to note that this is approximately 90 degrees, which is very similar to many of the curves that you would see out on the open road. So if we're going to actually consider what an apex is, let's actually look at something that's similar to an open road, which we have here. Assuming that our direction of travel is this way, and then we're going this way, we simply rotated everything about 45 degrees, and here's our apex right here. Now, your average person, your average commuter on a standard bike would simply travel this way, start to slow down right about here, travel this way, start turning their bars, following the contour of the road, and continue in this path of travel, starting to pedal again probably right about there. This is a very inefficient way of turning. It also puts you at risk for crashing. Anytime you start turning your bars any significant amount, you put yourself at significant risk for crashing. All right, there's a much better way to do that, and the much better way to do that would simply be to draw a straight line between these 2 points of travel. If we do that, we can see we cut off all of this space right in here. All right, we cut off all this unnecessary area. It's well known that the fastest line of travel through any curve is a straight line. This comes from motorcycle racing, this comes from auto racing, and it applies also to bicycle racing. It also applies to bicycle cornering in general. You don't even have to be racing, so perish that thought. This straight line here is the quickest and safest route through any corner. Now, this is what's called cutting an apex. Obviously, you don't want to hit the actual apex itself. You want to stay away from this curve, or away from this curb as it may be, or dirt or grass or whatever it happens to be. But you also want to angle yourself so that you cut across that apex as close as you can and in as straight a line as possible. And to demonstrate that, we'll take a look at 3 different curves. Now, choosing apexes is mostly about determining where you need to exit a curve. Where in this area do you need to exit? Do you need to be here? Do you need to be here? Do you need to be here? And those choices are all made based on what's coming afterwards. So if I move over to this third one, what do I have after here? Am I dealing with a straight road? Am I dealing with another curve? Am I dealing with another curve in the same direction? Okay. Each of those situations will necessitate a different kind of apex. And the easiest way to describe an apex is describe where you need to exit. So if you need to exit, for example, up here, we draw a line, and that's where we need to exit to. Okay? If we need to exit, say, right here, we can draw a line, and boom, exit there. If we need to exit down here for any reason, we draw a line, and boom, we can see exactly where we are exiting. All right. Now you'll also notice that each one of these arrows both exits in a different place and enters in a different place. And that is by the nature of how an apex works. You'll notice where each one of these enters and exits. If we divide this apex into 3 major parts, so we'll divide here, we'll divide here, divide here, divide here, divide here, we'll divide here. So basically we divide on essentially a 45-degree angle, and we split that apex up into 3 different parts. All right. In this case, you can see we're hitting right here inside that first third. That would be what would be considered an early apex. Okay. In this case, we're hitting in the middle third. That would be considered, obviously, a middle apex. And in this final case, you can see we hit in the last third, or the final third. This is going to be considered a late apex. All right. How do these apexes actually affect the way we enter a curve? Well, if I draw in our lines of travel, we're approaching here in this direction. We begin to slow down a little bit. We come through that corner nice and easy. Now we have to make a relatively hard turn here and accelerate a significant amount. Okay, that's an early apex. A middle apex, this is the one you will probably use along with a late apex the most. You're going to have to slow down a little bit more. You come through, and you only have to accelerate a little bit more than previously. You'll carry a lot of speed through this middle apex. This late apex is probably the one that you will use the absolute most along with the middle apex. The reason you would use the late apex, if you look at where you exit, which is right here, you really don't need a lot of acceleration because you're coming into this pretty fast. The reason you're going to use this is because of where you exit, and where you exit gives you a lot of room for error, especially in an open road. So if, for example, there's a car right here, you want to be able to avoid that car and have plenty of space to work with. Okay, by taking a late apex, you have all of this space to work with. In terms of entering this kind of curve, this is very rarely one of these. You're going to swing out a little bit right here, some significant slowdown right there, and you're going to dive into this corner really hard, really sharp, and basically trail straight through it. Okay. Again, middle apex, late apex, the most common ones you're going to use. Early apex, very, very infrequently used unless you're doing something like a chicane, or if you're traveling a very closed road, like if you're in a closed road race or something like that. So the late apex is the one you probably need the most work on learning, because it is actually very, very, very important to learn. Okay, how do we actually hit these apexes? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit in the next video in terms of leaning into an apex, in terms of counter steering and things like that. Suffice to say, at this point, you're going to instigate a lean into the curve this way. You're going to counter steer your front wheel that way, which means pushing forward on this handlebar. All right, that will add some centrifugal force. It'll carry you right on through this line. So, bearing in mind the 3 different kinds of apexes, let's also go look at another very common situation here. This very common situation is a hairpin curve. In this case, the quickest line through is going to be this way, followed by a continued wide sweeping curve. Again, this would be considered a very late apex curve. Okay, if I draw my marks here, first, second, and third part of the curve, part of the apex, you're doing an almost very, 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 very late apex. So you're going to come in here, you're going to swing really wide, and you're going to dive into this corner. Really dive in, okay? Right about here is where you're going to lean in. You're going to counter steer that front wheel away with the pressure on that inside hand, that inside drop, and that will track you straight through. So again, late apex, very necessary for a hairpin curve. If we back all that out, if we were to decide to take, for example, an early apex, our early apex takes us right there. We have to hit the brakes right here. We have to hit the brakes and crank the bars to kind of swing around the outside. Leaves us no room for error. If we take a middle apex, it's a better line. But again, we're going to have to hit the brakes and it'll take us wide. That's something we don't want to do. We absolutely, absolutely, absolutely want to cut across that apex and be able to take a simple swing through. All right. So again, if we make our division marks, come back. If we make our division marks, let's redraw here. Got our hairpin curve. We want to make our divisions right here. We need to late apex, and this is actually a combination of two different things. It's a late apex, and we kind of have to dive again into this and swing out this way. So again, out wide, cut in, cut across the apex, the late apex here, and down. Moving on to one more example, multiple curves. All right, this is why knowing your apexes and being able to set up different apexes is very important, because you have to be able to always set up the curve you're in anticipation of the next one ahead of you. So for example, if you know that this kind of configuration is coming along, you really need to think about setting up for this curve first. Not this one. This one you react to. If we go 1 and 2, this is your primary concern. This one is merely reactionary compared to curve number 1. So if we think about it backwards, and this is assuming you know what's coming. If we're thinking about it backwards, we're looking at the fastest line through. We're going to be looking at that. Now we're going to be looking at this. Okay. That gives us a middle apex curve. It gives us a middle apex curve. All right. Where we cut in, we take a middle apex here, and we simply shift our weight. Okay. We've got our bike right here. We're going to counter steer this way using pressure on the inside, and we're going to lean to the inside. That instigates another corner for us there. So 1, 2, 3, middle apex and middle apex. Now, granted, this is a 1-lane road. If there's 2 lanes, simply have to cut everything in half, which is not too difficult, honestly. In most cases with lanes like this, you probably could actually take the lane if you needed to, but if you needed to exit here, you can see where now a late apex corner becomes actually essential if you're going to stay in there. So you'll come this way. Direction of travel is again south to north. You'll string it together here, and you'll exit right on the right curb. Again, here, bike is facing that way. Counter steer this way by pressuring the inside curve, lean this way. Once the bike is here, counter steer this way by pressuring this inside hand, leaning in. So essentially you're always leaning into the hand that is counter steering. All right, and again, that track will take you nice and smooth through. Pardon my drawing. My drawing's awful. So, now that we've gone through different kinds of apexes, in the next video, we'll actually talk about a couple of real-world applications. We'll see some handlebar-mounted video of different cornering techniques, and we'll mark out a few different kinds of corners and a couple of different kinds of apexes, and essentially how they are used together. So stay tuned for that video coming up soon.